Welcome back to Wenn Schon Denn Schon, my YouTube channel. And I know every time I say that it's a huge pleasure, but really, I'm going to be honest, this is a bit of a fanboy pleasure for me to welcome my guest today, Emma Black, who I sometimes call, I used to say green, but I've decided to call her the emerald goddess of the Baroque oboe. So welcome to the channel, Emma.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's really lovely to be able to speak with you again.
And I'm gonna normally I ask my guests what their favorite performances are, but I'm gonna start off by saying a couple of my favorite performances of yours, because it's really true to say that your Bach C minor double concerto accompanied me last year through lockdown. I reckon it's not an exaggeration to say I listened to it 20 times, and I put it on again today. I love that recording so much. And I really want to talk to you about your work with the Bach Netherlands Society. And the other one, and the reason I call you the emerald goddess of the Baroque oboe, is for the Bach concerto, which was then animated, and your line was in this emeraldy green color. And yeah, I just love them so much. That particularly there's something about your playing in the Bach C minor double concerto. It expresses so much to me of your culture of sound and vulnerability. And I'm going to stop now, otherwise I'll talk about that for an hour. So I'm going to stop. But anyway, but now I am going to ask you, in your career as a Baroque oboist and a modern oboist, chamber musician, all of the concerts you've played, and you really have played all over the world, if you were to think of a couple of really memorable ones, what are they and why are they so memorable to you?
Okay, well, right at the moment, I'm in St. Petersburg, and I'm working with Teodor Currentzis, who I don't know if you know. Have you listened to any of Currentzis' recordings?
No.
Oh my God, Jeff, this is a whole huge hole in your musical education. Google right now Teodor Currentzis. I mean, he's like God. Well, I'm sure people are going to hate me saying that, because I mean, as many people love him, many people don't like him either. However, we did a performance of Beethoven 7 and Beethoven 5 in the Proms in, was it 2017 or 2018, in front of about 7,000 people.
Oh, hang on. What's the orchestra?
Musica Eterna.
I think I might. Are they? It's romantic music on period instruments.
They do everything. When we do classical music, it's on classical instruments. I don't play with their modern stuff. They've done a whole lot of Tchaikovsky and Mahler recordings as well, which are incredible, all on modern. But when they do Mozart, we did all the Da Ponte operas last year. That's on period instruments.
Okay, so my musical education, I have heard them. Sorry.
Yeah, you have. Okay.
There are many holes in it, but that's. But I need to refresh it. So yeah. You did Beethoven 5 and Beethoven 7 at the Proms. What are you doing in St. Petersburg?
Right now we've just finished making recording of Symphony Mozart 40 and 41, and we've just been doing concerts of the Marische Trauermusik, which is an incredible piece of music. And we've had 3 concerts. We had 2 concerts in Moscow a couple of days ago. First concert in St. Petersburg last night, another concert in St. Petersburg tonight, and then we go to Nizhny Novgorod, which I've never been there, and then Madrid and Barcelona. So all the places where you can't, where concerts are still happening with COVID in this year. And I must say, I mean, okay, there are many other groups that I love playing with, but I think Teodor is extremely unique because he's got this method of well, when you talk about rehearsal methods, I mean, a lot of people. A lot of groups rehearse things in a fairly long, big arc type of way, which can be great, and it can work and go very quickly, and you get a fantastic result within a very short space of time. With Teodor, his rehearsal work is absolutely meticulous. He deconstructs the entire piece and then reconstructs it. And that sounds like a rather academic process and rather acribic, but it is. But however, at the end of it, every single member of the orchestra knows how their part is aligned with another part. So you have a complete score in your head, and then this complete score shared by 80 people or so takes on a life of its own, and it has an energy that is in my experience, relatively unparalleled. And so working with him and working with any of the music he chooses is always it's a very long process. I mean, usually you rehearse for 2 or 3 days before a concert, or 3 or 4 days if you're lucky. I mean, we rehearse for 12 to 14 days before a concert, and so, which is, you know, it's a different level. It's a completely different level of getting to know the score. And I think I'm off the topic, aren't I? I have a favorite.
No, you're exactly on topic. This is fascinating.
I'll just go into this a little bit more. And I think this really getting into the score is very much to do with why I love playing period instruments so much. Because when you look at when you take a piece of music, as a baroque player, a historical player, not that I can just call myself that, because, you know, I played modern oboe for so many, and I still play modern oboe. But generally, a modern instrumentalist will take their line, their part, and they'll learn that part. And then when they, I'm talking about my students, so obviously I'm not talking about a lot of professional musicians here. And then when they get to, you know, they have to play in the concert, they'll then take it to the piano player, and that will basically be the first time they've actually played it through with the piano and have any idea of what the entire score is. And this is a way of looking at music from the top line down, which sort of happened, I guess, when the focus of music was on the melodic rather than the harmonic. And here with certain conductors, Harnoncourt also did the same. We build things up from the bottom. We strip everything, and you really look at the harmonic structure and something, and then it's built up from that. And I find that a bit of a process that's a little bit lost on many modern, especially students, but also I have to say in many modern orchestras, where it's so much melody focused without a clear knowledge of the harmonic structure and what's actually happening around you.
I think that you've hit on a few things that come to my mind when I hear you say that. The first is that I can understand why you prefaced your comment saying that Teodor, that it's polarizing. I can think why is that we talk about, in my maths teaching, we talk about inviting our students onto the magic carpet with us, to come and join us on a ride on this magic carpet. And the magic carpet ride that Teodor is proposing to the musicians is one that involves a lot of hard work. And
absolutely,
I think that many musicians, through various reasons, and perhaps what you've said about this idea of just the melody and harmony, these two ideas, but it's become very pragmatic. It's let's get it together, play more or less together, listen well, and then it'll be done, without that deep study. And it's to do with, I guess, money and finances and resources of having the time to do that. But I could imagine that if you are interested in this holistic approach and really understanding what's going on, I would have loved to have spent this time looking at number 40. Well, 40, there are no trumpets. I would have just sat in the hall with the score. But 41, I would have loved to do that. I used to really love, I'm like, people that would remember playing with me in Tornhala, I always had the score at the first rehearsal, and it was inevitable that I would be there with the score. But this idea of actually doing it as a collective, it's quite rare in my experience. I haven't been in orchestras for 20 years, but I think there weren't many conductors who dared to do that.
No.
Because the musicians would say, hang on, when's the break? When are we going? So having these 12 days, that must have been amazing.
Yeah. It's a mind-blowing process. And of course you get exasperated. And of course you think, oh, sometimes just play. But then when you actually get into the concert, there's this, I'm going to sound really grandiose, and I apologize to people who don't like that idea, but it's like bringing the divine into reality when everyone is really in the same energy wavelength. You're part of something bigger than yourself. And this is and then you ask what my favorite concerts are. There are many favorite individual concerts, but concerts where that collective energy, which I guess is the reason we do music or we do anything we love, is to bring some sort of idea of something larger than ourselves into our life. And there are elements of many concerts that you feel, wow, that was amazing, that was great. But there are not many concerts that combine all those elements to make you feel as if you're part of something bigger than you are.
And I think you've just probably articulated why I love those Bach performances so much, because you're thinking and what you're aiming for, and it makes sense to me now, knowing a little bit of the way you think. I used to really love it when Frans Brüggen came to town and worked with the Tonhalle. I used to just, and it was polarizing. It was polarizing the orchestra. I would be sitting there like a little puppy, just looking at him and just lapping it up. And other professional musicians will be, they'll be worrying about whether his beat was clear or all other things that to me are completely extraneous, that aren't, we weren't playing, I don't know, Stockhausen or Henze or things where it was really, where that was vital. That wasn't needed. Where it was the beat was the least important thing, because the beat's supplied by the basses and the timpani and the cello, that wasn't the thing. And I used to sit there just lapping it up. I used to love that. And also, if you ask me, my performances that I like to listen to of that repertoire, the orchestra of the 18th century, I still love listening to those ones. They were seminal. Remember when they came out in the 80s? It was like, oh my God, this music can be like that.
Yeah. I think it was, I can't actually remember what made me want to actually play baroque oboe. Oh, well, actually I do. But what made me really want to love playing baroque oboe, but those recordings, certainly part of it. I mean, the actual reason why I started, investing so much of my time in it was I was so fortunate was to be playing in Zurich in the orchestra, and Harnoncourt wanted to do all the Mozart operas on original instruments, and I had very little experience. I played a baroque oboe once or twice, and I said, yeah, sure, not realizing, of course, that it's a huge can of worms. But but working with him was one of my first professional gigs on the historical oboe, which was also amazing, because Harnoncourt made every single member of the orchestra feel equally important, and he had a way of working. I mean, sometimes I listen to Harnoncourt and to the recordings now, and I think that it's not quite my taste anymore, but. Or even sometimes when I was, not part of the show, but listening to it from the outside, I remember thinking, well, it's questionable. But when you're in it, it's so logical what he's doing, and his train of thought is so clear and enticing that there's no other option in your brain than to play in the way that he wants you to play.
You've also articulated something that I used to say about the great conductors. And a modern conductor I love working with was Gennady Rozhdestvensky. And when I played under him, and I was lucky to play a concerto, or whenever you played, I had this feeling you have the freedom to do exactly what he wants you to do. And I guess that's what Harnoncourt conjured up in the Zurich Opera. I actually went to a few. I think I went to a magic flute and a few things like that. So I can absolutely understand what you mean. But how did you come to be in Zurich in the first place? Like, you were in Melbourne, you studied in Melbourne. What got you to Zurich in the first place?
Well, when I first left Melbourne, I got married really early to a singer, Steve Davison, and he went to study in Greece. He went to study in Greece, and I went to study with Heinz Holliger in Freiburg, which is just up the road from Zurich. And then when Stephen finished in Greece, he got into the Zurich Opera studio, and so he moved there, and I sort of went back and forth from Freiburg while he was still in the studio, and then he got offered a position in the Zurich Opera, so which is why we ended up in Zurich.
Got it. I actually remember a remarkable Wozzeck that he did. I have this image of him being thrown against a wall as part of the thing in Wozzeck. I can't remember when that was. And he also did Beethoven 9 with us in the Tonhalle.
Yeah, often. Yeah. So that's why Zurich. But from Zurich, I mean, I had kids really early. I was pregnant when I was 24. So it was a good place. It was a good place to start a family. Because when as a female, I mean, this is another issue. As a female musician, when is a good time to have kids? I mean, it's really a hard thing.
Emma, you've touched on something that's a little bit important to me in these interviews, and I would like to hear a little bit about your perspective about that. Not if you're comfortable sharing, like, sure, choosing when to have kids, but also how has it been for you? Has it been difficult for you to flourish as a soloist and as a teacher? Do you think that gender has been an advantage or more likely a disadvantage? But it's something I'm keen to talk about.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to talk about because what I'm talking about is my feelings rather than I don't have any scientific data in front of me. Obviously, as a woman, you can say goodbye to 10 years of your professional life, basically. And so, and I'm not being over dramatic when I say that. You know, I mean, my career path would possibly have been quite different had I not had children when I was in my early 20s. Or had I mean, that's the whole perspective. Also, you know, when you're married, you can't not both people in the marriage can have an equal, I mean, career. I mean, that's not the marriage is giving and taking. And, you know, if you're young and you're having kids, it then seems logical that your partner, who is also a brilliant musician, or ex-partner in my case, is a fantastic musician, that is more supported at the time. I mean, that's in a marriage, there's give and take. However, I will say that I think having kids, I mean, many people, especially in Switzerland at the time, said, oh, you know, you should hide your pregnant as long as possible. And as soon as you had kids, you must make sure you come back straight away, because otherwise people won't hire you. I'm talking about from a freelance perspective, obviously, not from a orchestra. So there's that, and that's real.
That's something that, you know, obviously as a man, I would never have had to even consider that. I mean, when we had kids, obviously I wasn't playing in the orchestra anymore. I wasn't a musician, but, you know, you can go and have a little bit of leave, and then you come back, and it's not, that's something that isn't even considered. But I'm amazed at actually telling you to hide it. That's,
yeah. And
that's at a time when you're pretty vulnerable. I mean, you're pregnant, and this is something I can comment on as an ex-Chinese medicine practitioner. Often when women are feeling the worst, there's no outward sign. So, you know, in that first trimester, when a lot of women do it really, really tough, no one's offering you a seat, no one's even caring about you. And if on top of that, another added layer of someone, because how can you see that any other than there's something wrong with it? If someone's telling you to hide it, then that's
But I think things have changed a lot, even in the last 20 years or so. So, I mean, I'm talking about, 25 years ago now. And I think, in my experience, a principal woodwind player as a female has to prove herself way more than a man, always and continually. And any tiny thing that goes wrong or may not be perfect or whatever is judged dramatically more harshly than with a man. Not everywhere. Obviously there are places which are not like that. But I have experienced orchestras that are like that.
Unfortunately,
but as I said, I don't have numbers, so I can't. All I'm talking about is my own feelings and my own experiences.
Unfortunately, I think that's by no means restricted to music. I think that's a very common experience in the corporate world and anywhere where maybe we can say anywhere where men have historically dominated. The gains have been hard fought and unfairly, it's true what you say, unfairly judged. And I hope that we're at a tipping point. In Australia, it feels like we're at a bit of a tipping point. But
we were brought up my parents. I mean, it's like we're still brought up in a rigid, well, semi-rigid way of thinking, where even if we would say that where we have equal rights and everything, I think somewhere in the back of our minds, maybe, but with some of us in any case, there's still this little tiny thing that men have more power than women. And I think the way kids are being educated these days, I see with my own kids, they don't feel that. So that's wonderful. So I mean, I'm pretty sure things are changing, and I'm sure it's a tipping point. But we're still, it takes a lot of strength to overcome what's been programmed in us, or even now when we know what's right, it's very hard to overcome what's already in there.
Absolutely. In Australia now, there's this thing of enough is enough, and that's you know, and well, time will tell, but I do think the younger generation won't tolerate it, and hopefully things will continue to change, and you know, some of the inequities will be, I don't know if they can be addressed or redressed, but yeah, the improvement has to continue. Right. Now, we're going to go back to, after that, that's important to me. It won't have become evident yet in the channel because, as I've been saying to people, I learned from my teachers were all men, and because I wanted to start this journey with my teachers, but I do have a very firm desire to interview, because there are so many amazing women who have influenced and inspired me, that as more and more interviews come out, that will become more and more evident. So thank you very much for talking about that.
And say also.
So you're in Zurich, and then you went and studied in the Schola, is that right?
Yeah, from Zurich. After the first Mozart opera with Harnoncourt, I thought I should actually get to know this instrument a little bit better before I start, you know, cavorting around with it. And that being said, I was only there for a year and a half with Katerina. She was the Baroque teacher there. Or she still
from
is.
the Freiburg Baroque Orchestra, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I heard. Yeah, great player.
And I mean, I've been so blessed with my teachers. You know, Holliger for 2 years, Maurice Borg in Geneva, then after that for 3 years, and then I must say most of my real music teachers have been people like Harnoncourt, Nello Santi. Did you ever work with Nello Santi?
I didn't, but I did one. He came and did one concert, but all of the guys in the opera used to talk about, and in Basel, my friends in the Basel Radio Orchestra, they talked about him a lot. I only got to do one concert with him, but what? Well, a genius, actually, a genius.
I mean, just amazing. So I mean, apart from having been blessed with people like Holliger and Borg, I've been blessed with so many fantastic conductors that I've worked with as well. So then I went to the Schola, and Katerina was a great teacher, and she was really good at helping me dissect sound. I think I can say that, because you can't just pick up a Baroque oboe from a modern as being from a modern opera and expect it to even though you're probably physically able to create a sound, it's not. You can hear immediately that she's a modern oboe player trying to play Baroque oboe, and so that's what I had to go back and learn. And what I really love about what absolutely drew me to historical instruments is the fact that there's so many more harmonics in the sound. I mean, the modern oboe is a very compact sound. Obviously, it pierces through everything. It's a beautifully compact sound. It's gorgeous, round, can be. Whereas a Baroque oboe, I mean, it's got so much. It's got more space, and you have to learn to create this space. Katerina, she. I wish I had a pendulum and I could say. Well, I can say she should say, like, the sound is like a you know, the bulb of a pendulum, and you put the pendulum into a glass or an amphora or something like that, and that space between the pendulum and the walls of the vase or the amphora, that is what creates a beautiful sound, because you've got the center of the sound and you have a cushion around it, and this is something that you have to learn to visualize. And then also learn to create with the way you use your breath, and the way you use it as well. Absolutely, the way you use the physicality of the body and the resonance. I mean, I believe in resonance cavities in the body. I know many people don't, but maybe it's just a concept. But you have to use a lot more resonance in order to have a sound that's going to do what you want to do and be a medium for your expressivity. Expression, what's the word anyway? And so that's really what she gave me, I would say.
And then And then did you start getting gigs, or did you start working with different ensembles? What was the path from there to?
Well, then we decided to leave Zurich, because Zurich started feeling like a gilded cage somehow. I mean, you know, it's a gorgeous place to live. You just want to get out of there. Oh, I did anyway. And Stephen also did. And my ex-husband, got a contract at the Volksopera in Vienna, and we had some of our best friends living in Vienna. So we thought, why not? So we just upped and left and went to live in Vienna. And there I was very, very fortunate that I played for Martin Hasselberg with the Wiener Academy, and started working with them as principal oboist. And this is where I really basically took my baby steps as a historical Baroque oboe player, in a full-time capacity.
When was that?
Basically 2000.
Right.
I basically gave up modern oboe for 2 years in that time, and which I realize is a luxury. Not everyone can do that. If you want to play both, it's a bit of a luxury to be able to put one to the side and just concentrate on the other one. It's like learning a language. You know, it's difficult to learn 2 or 3 languages at the same time. It's easy to speak them all once you've got them, but you know, while you're learning them, it's preferable, should we say, to be able to concentrate on the one. Yeah. So then, playing in Wiener Academy was great, and then a friend of mine was the manager of Kammerorchester Postdam, where Sergio Azzolini became artistic director, and Ensemble Aureole that used to be then, and then they merged with the Staatsorchester Potsdam, which then became Kammerorchester Potsdam. Anyway, Sergio was then the artistic director, and I went up and then became the principal oboe with them, which was wonderful because it was between Berlin and Vienna, and it was mostly 80% on modern oboe, so that got me back playing modern oboe. But occasionally we did things with historical oboe as well. And Sergio being there meant that even though it was even if it was played on modern instruments, it's still, rhetorically speaking, it had a very authentic feel about it. Authentic in terms of playing in a rhetorical style, playing in an authentic manner.
So I've got a question which I'm just going to ask. Is there a difference between the instrument you use, a Baroque oboe and a classical oboe? Did it change around Mozart and Beethoven? Is there a distinct, like an actually different instrument? Absolutely.
So the Baroque oboe, the French Baroque oboe, which was the original one, came into being around about 1670. And you notice there's a gap in the operas of Lully between 1650 and 1680, when oboes were beginning to be used, because before that, there was Schalmei, and which was also obviously also to do with being playing outside, because they're loud beasts. And then the Ottertail brothers took a couple of decades to develop what we call what the Hautboy, the original Baroque oboe, which then made its first outings in around about 1680 in the French court, and then became, you know, prolifically used by Lully, by Ottertail, by Couperin, and of course its German counterparts for Bach and everything. And then, and here I was talking about concept of sound before, where you need space within it. Music developed, and it became more virtuosic, and you needed a little bit more flexibility. So the bore became narrow, the pitch became higher. And 430, 415 was of course no means everywhere. You had 392, you had 400, 402, 408, 415. 415 is just like a general medium, but it's a German, it's a German pitch. The French pitch is 392. Sorry if I'm getting into all these things, which is probably very uninteresting to most people. But then as time grew on, but between 1750 or so, the instrument became developed and became a bit thinner, and the general pitch rose to 420, mostly 422. We play at 430 these days. And so the instrument is thinner, and the reeds are different. They have different dimensions. So yeah, it's a different instrument.
Right.
And from there, it continued developing. The bore didn't change dramatically from a late classical instrument. until around about, so let me get my dates right, around about 1860, 1870, when it became even thinner still, and the walls were, the bore became thinner and the walls became thicker. So, which is indicative of romantic, more piercing sound coming through, and of course mechanics that enabled a chromatic scale to be played without differentiations of color between each note, because of course on a baroque, on a classical instrument and a historical instrument, each note has a different sound. Like an F or a B flat has a very muffled sound, and it will always have a muffled sound because it's cross fingering. You don't actually have a key to make the sound. So, and all these differences are part of the music, which is why, of course, it's lovely that people play baroque music on a historical oboe, and it's completely necessary. But it's you can't really be historically informed unless you know what it sounds like on a historical instrument. When I was studying with Maurice Bourg, also with Holger, we used to play couperin sonatas in our lessons, and to play these on a modern instrument is so difficult. I was like glued to my Kreuken brothers recordings of these things, because it's like, I don't understand this couperin language until it sort of gets in there. It's a bit like Swiss German, really. When you get to the country, you don't understand how they on earth they understand each other. Then eventually, it's just like the cotton wool pops out of your ears. It's a little bit like that listening to French baroque with really good people. You have to really listen to it a long time. They say, okay, I understand, I get it.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that I like to think, I can only think in terms of the trumpet, but I think that Bach and all of the great composers were completely aware of which notes were a bit sounded different, and that is part of, they're meant to. So just in your normal scale on a baroque trumpet, the F, you need to do something to make the F in whichever key you're in. It's going to have a different sound, and I think that the way those notes are used, and the same on the oboe, those notes that are cross-fingered, obviously Bach would be aware of them and would use them for harmonic and emotional and all those kinds of purposes. Yeah. I want to do a Wenn Schon Denn Schon pivot, which is something I do in the middle of an interview, where I kind of change the topic, because I do want to talk a little bit about this, your connection with the Netherlands Bach Society, and particularly this My Beloved recording of the Bach C minor, which isn't an original oboe work, right? It wasn't originally written for oboe. No. But I would like you to, because I've just purely selfishly, because I have listened to it probably 20 times is not an exaggeration. I want to hear a little bit about its
I was
inception.
Just looking at it the other day. It's got almost 1 million hits, which is rather bizarre for a Bach oboe and violin concerto. I must preface what I'm about to say by saying I'm not a member of the Netherlands Bach Society. I'm a guest there. So
exactly, I know that.
I'll just preface everything I say with that. No, it's been I've done some wonderful projects with them over the last 3 years, and this particular recording, it's a little bit mixed for me, because I must honestly say I have I love it. I really love it. I have a little bit of a different idea about how the third movement should be. That's all. But what I really love about it very much is that the first movement especially is Schunske brought in this idea, because we first did our first concerts around Passion Time, and he was like, it should be piadum badum bum, way more introverted, not this piadum badum bum badada, not the sort of type happy sort of swingy thing that you usually hear, but something that's more introverted and something that's softer and rounder. And I think this is really something very, very beautiful to have brought out about it. Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it's such a lovely group of people. I mean, he's such an amazing violin player, and the continuo, the cellist, Lucia Schwarz, it's an absolute joy to play with. So, yeah, I don't know what questions you have about that recording.
I just wanted to hear a little bit about it, just so I could bask in that a little bit, just because I love it. I just love it so much. The other one that I've listened to a lot is the cantata, where you play the oboe da caccia, and where you did a little interview, which has the Jesu Joy as one of the choruses.
Yeah. I mean, it's just whenever you're blessed enough to work with good singers and a beautiful choir, everything. I think I said in that interview, it's such a feeling of communion. It's such a feeling of being part of a whole, and this this is just something that's it's so important to me in every facet of music making. It doesn't matter if it's historical, it doesn't matter if it's modern. It's this love and this joy of making something together. And the Netherlands Bach Society is definitely something that there's a definite joy in playing together and creating something together. And if it speaks to you, that's why.
It does, and that makes perfect sense, because I've listened to quite a few of their, they're in the process of doing all of Bach. I think that's the mission.
Yeah, we just did actually what was very beautiful. You can probably still find it online, actually. Johannes Passion 2 weeks ago we did with Netherlands Bach Society with René Jacobs conducting.
Oh wow.
If I have a link, I'll send it to you, but I'm not sure if it's still available, but I'm sure you can find it somewhere. It will be on all of Bach probably next year, but it was done for television 2 weeks ago,
right?
In Holland. And I mean, these works are so special. It's such a shame in Australia that they're not done so often, but of course it's obviously it's a lot to do with forces as well, with musical forces.
And also I think that in Australia somehow it became the Messiah, became the thing that gets done. And
I know
Christmas Oratorio never Weihnachtsoratorium, I don't know why, but I think it's probably to do with the British choir tradition and all of those different reasons that and maybe it's just the culture is not there, the tradition of it.
Purely logistically speaking, you need 4 baroque bursts for a Weihnachtsoratorium, and that's not it's not a given. There's no scheme for learning, for studying historical instruments. Luckily in Melbourne, they're starting up an early music department. Lyndon Watts is down there. I would have been there a few times this year, obviously, to do some seminars and do some teaching, but that's with COVID and stuff. That's not. I was supposed to be there now. Actually, I was supposed to be in quarantine in Perth right now, except my flight was cancelled and I couldn't be there, which is really a big shame.
Now, Emma, you've just very skillfully done my next pivot for me, because I want to talk about your teaching career. I know that you teach in Graz, but do you teach modern or
not anymore? I know. I was professor for modern oboe in Graz for 5 years.
Right.
And my contract finished last year, and now I'm teaching baroque oboe at the Vienna Hochschule.
Wow! So there's a baroque oboe class. So does the Wiener Hochschule have an old instrument department, or how does that work?
It's in its infancy. It's in its infancy, and we're building up. Stefan Gottfried, who's taken over from Harnoncourt, from Concertus, is building up very slowly, but that's fine. A baroque department at the university. There is a more established baroque department at the conservatorium, but Vienna is a large city, so it needs to have a bit more diversity. So that's where I'm teaching at the moment, which is teaching modern oboe. Travel to Graz is 2.5 hours away from Vienna. Yeah, so I'd have to go there at least once a week for these 10-hour, 12-hour days. So 5 hours of traveling to teach for 10 hours when you're already traveling around the world playing, it was absolutely exhausting. Not to mention that to teach, you need to keep everything up to the highest level possible on all instruments. And I'm really happy to play modern oboe, but I don't want to have to teach Barriosequenza or Stockhausen und Freundschaft every second day after playing a Bach cantata, because I am very flexible and I work hard to maintain flexibility, but it's just too much sometimes. You have to make a choice about where you want to be. And I'm not making that choice about where I'm playing, because I love playing modern oboe just as much as I like playing historical oboe, but I don't necessarily have to teach it all the time.
Yeah, that's perfectly logical. That makes sense. When you do teach, I wonder whether you could talk a little about I think I can guess what you're going to say, but I'd like to hear you articulate it, the core principles of when you're teaching. What do you, like, if let's say a student comes to study with you, first of all, what qualities are you looking for in your students to start with? And then what are the essentials for you? What do you, if they come and study with you, I guess it's 2 or 3 or however many years, what would you like them to arrive with, and what would you like them to leave with?
Well, ideally, in an ideal world, they would have been technically trained to a point where they can be musically expressive. Unfortunately, this is not always the case, and often it's not the case. And so I usually have to spend a year or two stripping back technique in order for a clean slate so that they can actually express. I mean, I might be old-fashioned, but without technique, you can do nothing. You can do very little without technique. In order to express, you need to have the colors to express with. And I whip myself, even now, I'll do an hour or two of scales every day. I mean, I just think that's an absolutely necessary component of playing an instrument. It doesn't matter if it's modern or if it's historical. You need to be able to play technically, and technique in a way that's not going to kill you. So obviously that's a majorly important point. But musically speaking, I like to get them away from the idea of just looking at music from their own perspective. You can't play anything only thinking you're the star of the show. You're never the star of the show unless it's just an unaccompanied thing. But even then, the music's the star of the show. And so you have to. I guess it's this romantic perspective, or what happened in the romantic times of where the individual became more important than the collective. Like we started having conductors, we started having star soloists, and something where interest was focused on the individual rather than the collective. And this is what modern music is. It's a collective of individuals, and I really like to get away from that, because it's a relatively new phenomenon, and if we can't play everything in a way, I mean, so I'm harping on about the same things all the time, so I'm really sorry, but it's the same thing with modern orchestras. They play in a style that is perhaps applicable from the years 1860 to 1920, but they play everything in the same style, and we're looking at a window of 50 years of middle romantic to early contemporary, where everything's played in the same way. And then they go and play Bach, and it's played in the same way. Mozart's played in the same way. And I think this is just such a narrow window. And so if anything with my students, I just try to broaden that a little bit and try and think of the rhetorical aspect, of course, when you're playing, harmonic aspect. What are you trying to say? What are you doing? And often I get them to play a phrase just on the entire phrase on one note, just to be able to, what are you doing with your tongue? What are you expressing? What are you trying to do with your fingers? If you can't do it with your fingers, show me what it is on one note. If I can't hear it on one note, I can't hear it in a phrase.
You know why I'm smiling like this? Because everything you've just said for the last 10 minutes, I realized why I'm a fanboy, because it's confirmation bias, because I agree with you 170,000%. That's exactly how even to the examples of doing a phrase on one note, it's remarkable. I don't know. That's really funny, because you've articulated a lot of what I think as well. And I sometimes used to say it's a bit in Europe, there's this idea of a brown sauce that gets put on things. And what you've described is that you get this brown sauce, and it might be okay on one dish, but when the brown sauce is on everything, then you get sick of it. Yeah. And yeah, so that's funny, and it's fascinating. Now I'm aware that you need to get to a rehearsal. So
I just want to say one. No, I don't even know the time. Oh God, it's okay. I've got another 15, 20 minutes. Right. I want to say one other thing about teaching. I mean, yeah, I play historical instruments, and I also play modern, but I don't think these are just tools. They're merely tools, and I'm really against these labels people put on people, like, oh, you're a historical player, so obviously you're not going to be playing that. Oh, you're a modern player, so you can't play that. That's absolute rubbish. I mean, you're using the tools that you have at the time. We're fortunate enough in this day and age to have the modern oboe, to have the classical oboe, to have a romantic oboe, to have a baroque oboe, on which we can play, on which we can use the language of that time to help us decipher what we want to say and how we want to be as musicians, and how we are as artists. And I think to put labels on that is really destructive. And also if I'm teaching modern oboe, I'm not necessarily going to teach it in a different way that I'll teach baroque oboe. I mean, I might teach things that that are more pertinent, that I might need a bit more. I don't need multiphonics on a baroque oboe, but a modern oboe, in my as far as I'm concerned, still needs the rhetorical approach just as much as the baroque oboe does. And a baroque oboe needs the technique and support of a modern oboe just as much as a modern oboe player does. So I don't see. I mean, Harnoncourt, in his wonderful book, Music as Speech. Have you read it? Musik als Klangrede.
I've read bits of it, extracts of it, I think, long time ago.
I mean, he was very much, you know, using the materials you have to teach you. And we're so fortunate we have so many materials that can teach us.
I wonder if you could go in, what do you mean exactly when you say a rhetorical approach? What do you mean by that?
This is one of the key tenets of the key laws of baroque, of playing baroque music, is that we talk about things from a rhetorical perspective. I mean, obviously, rhetorical means the art of persuasion, and how to persuade. Or in political times, in ancient Greek times, it was used as a political tool to persuade people towards your point of view. And from a musical perspective, is you're presenting an idea. But you're presenting it as speech. I mean, in romantic music, we have these long lines. We have, you know, these wonderful, and this is what we strive for, beautiful long lines of emotion that pull us to something. And in baroque music, we very often have micro phrases. We have phrases within phrases and phrases within the micro phrases. And these phrases you need to learn to speak with. You need to learn to articulate them. And this is what brings a performance to life. If I was to play a Bach the same way I play Bruckner, it would be brown sauce. It would be mush, and I wouldn't be able to get the light through. I mean, this is another one of my bugbears is to allow light through, is to allow light to come into a phrase, and to allow light to enter a phrase, you need to articulate that in order to let it in. And this perspective of the rhetorical aspect of playing is very much how to do that, how to deal with a phrase as speech, how to deal. No, I'm not saying I need words. I'm really anti that to say, oh, think of a sunshine. I can't stand that, because that's putting a different sort of picture onto something that is not meant to be anywhere near pictures. So we're talking about music as a different language whatsoever. So am I intelligible at all? I mean, it's very hard to discuss ideas.
I'm thinking that when you come to Melbourne, I want to get a lesson from you. So it's pretty intelligible, I think.
Okay. To allow light through, because without light you can't express, you have no perspective of where you are. So if I only have a long phrase, a long line, especially with baroque music, I have no perspective. I can't see where I am, and where I need to be is within my harmonic structure.
You know what's really fascinating to me is that when I listen to your playing, I suspected that there was a lot of depth of thought and analysis behind it. But what comes out, the phrases come to life, the light is there, the rhetorical nature is also there in your own playing, and also when your communication with the other artists. But it's really fascinating, and I'm sure this is going to be fascinating for people watching this interview, to hear you so articulately and completely intelligibly explain what it means. So I'm really glad that I asked you that. That's wonderful.
It's difficult to describe too without coming across as sounding too methodical, because I'm not at all. I mean, I am, obviously, but this is something you work on for so long that it becomes just a natural part of how you approach. The
way to describe it is non-dualistic. It's non-dualistic. It's not this or that. Yeah. It's both at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got one of my Tai Chi tops on, so I've got a little bit of yin yang harmony going on in my presence.
Very good.
Oh, Emma, such an absolute treat. And you know what? I'm already feeling that this is going to be, I'm going to ask for a sequel. I'm going to, because I'm going to end, because I want to have a little chat with you from my own account. So I'm going to say for now, And I think if you agree that later on, I will invite you back for a sequel to this interview.
With pleasure.
But for now, I'm going to say an immense thank you to you, and absolutely wonderful the way you can just, because we didn't plan it all, the way you can just riff on, you know, improvise on so many different topics with such clarity. And it's interesting to me that often when people speak really clearly, they're not sure whether they are speaking clearly, but I'm sure that when you watch this back and when other people watch it, they will benefit from watching it once, but also watching it more than once to pick up all the little nuggets, because you've really given us a lot of nuggets of wisdom.
My family always say I speak way too fast and that no one can ever understand me. So I'm a little bit, I have a little bit of a complex about the way I speak.
Well, your family, are you talking about your sisters?
Yes.
Well, I mean, you do come from, your family are, you know, you're not the only amazing one of your siblings, but they will have, but the great thing with YouTube is you can slow it down and they can watch it at 75%.
Yes, that's
so that'll be absolutely fine. So I'm going to say farewell to our audience with immense thanks to you, Emma.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. It's been a real pleasure.